A very instructive game played by Magnus Carlsen as white and Wesley saw as black. Some blitz match that I played, and it turned out that it was a really important game for Carlsbad pawn structure and Caro-Kan, and I have it now in my program when I'm teaching my students. Let's get immediately to it. e4 c6, d4 d5, e takes d, c takes d, bishop d3. It's very interesting to see that this opening has its own logic from the start. This bishop on c8 wants to get out to f5 or g4 before they play e6. And by playing bishop d2, we're not allowing that. We're kind of inviting them to play e6. But of course, black is not going to do it. So we had knight c6 attacking the pawn on d4 and provoking white to play knight f3, so the bishop can come out to g4. We have c3. That means that the queen is still guarding g4 square. Therefore, we have knight f6 for black. White is not going to develop the knight yet. We have bishop f4. Basically, what white is thinking is that black has no real meaning in bishop g4 because there is no pin and the queen is just going to move away. Black is actually happy to get the bishop out and then to play e6 no matter what the bishop is doing on g4. Queen b3. We don't want to give a purpose to this bishop on g4. Hitting the pawn on b7, typically when the bishop is out of c8, we get an idea of attacking b7. Couple of ways for black. One is queen b6, they get a double pawns. Of course, it would be a little bit at least better for white. But we had queen c8. It is the main move in this position according to theory. Why queen d7 is not as good as queen c8, we'll see just a couple of moves after. Knight e2, black plays e6, let's say we play knight gf3, black goes with bishop e7. Here we have this thing, the king and the queen are standing on the same diagonal and we have some ideas of removing this knight and going with bishop b5. So how that's going to happen? We can play knight e5 attacking the queen. Black can take it, but then we have d takes c. We're going to go with bishop b5 and exploit the fact that these two pieces are on the same diagonal. Queen c8, we continue our development with knight e2 and then e6. Knight gf3 and bishop e7. There is not much happening, white castles. And here black decides to go with bishop h5. You may wonder why black is not castling yet and why this move. The answer is hidden behind the logic of this pawn structure. This pawn chain is pointing towards the king side and most likely white's going to be attacking that side of the board. Going with bishop h5, not really just waiting, but approaching g6 square, from which it's going to be possible to exchange for this beautiful d3 bishop of white. And now it's white's turn. We're going to try to find a plan. So since we said that the king side attack is going to happen, we need pieces on the king side. One move that we can play in order to go according to the plan is rook a to e1, intending to lift the rook to the third rank, and eventually when the knight is not there, swing over to the king side and attack possibly black's king on g8. Black goes with bishop g6. We cannot do anything else than take here on g6, h take g6. Because of this pawn structure, because of other pieces not being able to access the king side easily, there is not much to hope for black on the king side with this open file. However, this rook may be useful in defending their king, not allowing white to break into their camp through the h-file. Means that maybe the king can stay on f8. Keeping the rook on h8 means on the other side that the rook is not going to be able to join the other side of the board like queen side or the center if white decides to open there. White plays h3 with the idea of lifting the rook to the third rank to double the rooks if the black's king intends to stay in the center. When we have h3, there is nothing to harass the rook with a knight g4. And black goes with a6. This is typical for the Carlsbad pawn structure, that black wants to go through the queen side and push the pawns there. We got a4, preventing b5. There is no easy way for black to push the pawn now. And we had here knight e7. They're kind of trying to preemptively place the knight for the case of knight e5, which is being expected from white to do. They're not still castling, and it's a good question how to organize when the king is staying in the center. We can definitely prepare to either go through the center, maybe even eventually c4, or in case they castle, the rook is going to be still standing well here. Before we got castling by black, white just goes with h4. We had h3 previously, but now there is no point of waiting. Immediately after h4, we got knight back to f6, square g4, and black is thinking, let me get a knight here. On the other side of this is that they want to prevent h5. And now the move that I liked a lot. It's a thematic thing. You want to attack on the king side, playing queen d1. This queen is going to be useful more on the king side. We just need to move away the knight from f3 and we'll be almost ready to support h5. The moment white moved the queen back to d1, we got b5. So they want to, as we know, make progress on the queen side. Finally, knight e5. We're supporting h4, h5 in a way. We need more, but in case knight takes, pawn takes, and the knight needs to move, we maybe get on the next move h5 in. Of course, black is not going to take. We go just b4. And now what I need to do in order for this h4, h5 to be prepared? Bishop g5. The knight is controlling h5, so maybe we can either remove it or just pin it this way. If you'd remove this knight on c6 eventually, and you see this knight again, you'll see that it cannot really move because the bishop on e7 falls. That's going to be the reason for Wesley to play the move rook e8. Now the bishop is defended by the rook. Not a problem for Magnus, we go just with rook h3. Thinking, well, maybe you can even take it with the knight. I'm going to get this h-file for myself. And I'm going to chase your knight away with g4. You need to run away with the knight. And I'm going to try to deliver mate here. Black goes with queen c7. Putting question on this knight on e5. Magnus needs to either defend it or take the knight on c6. He decided to go with knight d to f3. This knight was not doing anything. Now it's going to be improving. We may even trade and get this knight to e5. B takes c3, of course we need to recapture, and now rook c8. Magnus is thinking, what should I do in order to improve my pieces? What can I improve? How can I improve? And you just find the move by asking these simple questions. I mean, we need this queen involved. And we again got this knight in front of the queen. And what's the purpose of this knight? Well, only to hold this knight on e5. So what we're supposed to do is just get rid of this thing. It's going to be also for this rook to be able to guard the weakness on c3 we got. And this is the best rook we can get actually in the Carlsbad pawn structure when it's defending. And also it's going to be attacking along the h-file eventually. Since we were talking about it, I'm just going to be playing out now. Knight c6, of course, freeing up the square e5 for the knight from f3 to go to. The knight goes to e5. Everything is holding together and we are preparing slowly but surely h5. The queen moves back to c7 and now this move that also I liked in this game, queen f3. Getting the queen closer to the king side, but also there is a concrete thing that we are threatening playing this move. You see this pressure on f7? The knight was pinned and then unpinned and it's again pinned because the pawn falls with a devastating effect to the black's king. In case black plays something irrelevant like rook b8, we just need to remove this knight. Therefore, the move h5 is powerful. The knight cannot take any, the pawn takes. We can even take with the rook here. Knight takes, we go queen f7, king h7. We check the king this way. Look what's going to happen. Cannot go to h8 because we have knight g6. In case of king h7, we have also this beautiful bishop f6 move. In case they defend it with the rook, we go and deliver mate with queen h5. They cannot take obviously the bishop because their queen is hanging. And if they go to d6, we have a beautiful knight d7, just breaking the coordination between the queen and the pawn, threatening mate again here. They go rook g8 again, we have queen h5, mate. It's a beautiful combination and we're threatening h5. Therefore, bishop d8. Carlsen goes with h5 anyway. Obviously, in case of g takes h5, we can take on f6 and take again on h5, and we are going to be leading the attack. However, we got knight h5. Carlsen first takes on d8, and after rook takes d8, he goes with g4. There is no need to sacrifice on h5. We just go and chase the knight away with knight f6. And here, you may guess the move. It's not like crushing yet. It's not devastating, but it is a very sensible, logical move that is intending to involve one more and the last piece into the game. There is no need, I think, to pause the video, but if you want to, you can do it. I'm gonna say it's king g2. Most of you were right with this, because it's obvious that the f1 rook is not doing anything yet. We'd like to get it to h1, connecting with the other rook and threatening mate on h8. Obviously, black needs to respond to this threat. Let's say they would go with something like rook b8, rook f to h1, continuing with the plan. And now in case black's king wants to run away, which I think they should try to, we have this beautiful g5 move, because this time the knight cannot really go to h5 since we have knight g6, and the game is completely collapsing for black. They can try king f8, but we still have g5, knight h5, knight g6. They cannot try to run away yet. They need to play first g5. It seems like maybe we need to play rook f h1, and then we get king f8, and the king of black is trying to run away to the center. It's going to be safer. This pawn is a problem for us. We cannot chase the knight away, and if we don't chase the knight away, it's going to be hard to checkmate the black's king. But it is also a pawn that is not coordinating with other pieces of black. There is no easy way, in other words, to defend that pawn if it gets under attack. And that's exactly what Carlsen did here. He just attacks it. Knight goes to h7, we just go rook f to h1 and game over. And if it goes to e4, which happened in the game, we just go with f3. Okay, it's weakening a little bit white's king, but if the knight goes away, the pawn is going to be taken. And that's exactly what happened here. Knight back to f6, rook f to h1. There's no need to rush and take this pawn. First, let's create a threat of checkmate. The king needs to run away. And then we take on g5. Queen took on c3. So thought that after rook h8, king e7, everything is safe. After rook takes d8, there is not much after queen takes g7. Although the pawn is under attack, you can just play queen c2. Very important check, because after king g3 there is rook f8. Otherwise, in other words, without queen c2, here we would have knight g6 because the pawn is pinned. The queen is guarding that square. So white needs to continue with creating that threat of knight g6 by playing rook h6 first. Not that we are threatening only knight g6, but also the knight needs to respond to this threat. So the knight goes back to e8, and it seems like we can do knight g6, but actually let's be careful, the queen is hanging as well. Carlsen needs first to deliver check like this. If it goes here, can you guess what's the move for white? Let's pause a little and you will guess the right move that finishes immediately the game. It is queen d8 mate. Let's look at it. Beautiful mate. And after f6, Carlsen went for queen g6. Another move that deserves an exclamation mark, I would say. However you respond to it, I'm either going to get my knight to g6 and fork these two pieces, or I'm going to get a tempo for rook h7, which is going to be devastating. So thought that he can just take the pawn on a4, because after rook h7, he has just king d8. Thought that the queen is going to be useful here. Rook d7 may be met by king c8. Carlsen found a beautiful move that is very difficult, I would say, to find in this position. The queen is almost checkmating the king, but almost. There is nothing to do at this point with the queen here. There is no queen g7, there is no queen f7, there is no queen e8. There is nothing we can do with the queen currently on g6. And he found this beautiful b1, something that would never come to my mind. Okay, maybe not never, but definitely not in a blitz game. He found it in a couple of seconds. Incredible move. We are threatening queen b8 mate. The only way for black to defend against checkmate is by playing queen b5. And now again, in less than a second, pause the video and try to find it, because it's again not the first thing that you can think of. Beautiful move, knight c6. And now you can see the whole problem of black. The king cannot really move to c8 because knight e7 is a fork, losing the queen. The queen takes, which happened in the game. We have queen b8, forces queen c8, and then queen d6, and mate on the next move. In case you enjoyed the video, maybe write a comment. I'd appreciate it a lot. Possibly subscribe, and see you soon again.